Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is In-Young Lee, and I support science instruction in Southgate and BCM.
Hello, hello. I am Erica Lee, and I support Lincoln Heights, El Sereno, East LA, and Boyle Heights.
And Craig's robot is here today. Also, it's going to be handling the slides. So today we're here to talk about eliciting student ideas. And this is ASTP, Ambitious Science Teaching Practice number 2. If you were with us in our first session, then you learned about the Ambitious Science Teaching Practice number 1. So we're going to build on that. We're going to number 2 today. In addition, if you were with us the first time, we did an Ambitious Science Teaching Practices intro, and we saw a video sequence on introducing like each of the 4 practices, and it was an elementary introduction. And so what we were able to do between now and then is we were able to find a secondary, some secondary videos, and we made a secondary sequence. It focuses on middle school. And so this way we know that some of your teachers might say, oh, but that's elementary. You know, how's that going to work in secondary? Well, now we have a middle school example for you to share with your teachers so that they can see that it actually is magical because it works across grade spans. So today we'll start off with, how are you feeling today on this bright and sunny Saturday morning? We've got some Lego faces here for you. Type in the chat, don't hit return yet, but type into the chat how you're feeling. And we're going to do a waterfall. I'll do a countdown. I'll give you another 10 seconds, then I'll do a countdown. Okay, 3, 2, 1, waterfall. All right, we've got some 5s and some 8s. All right. Nice. 10, yes, nice. 1, very good. All right, thank you, Young Mai. So we just, In-Young and Erica and myself just finished an elementary session where we went through this, and so I'm feeling number 3 because the elementary session was a lot of fun, and happy to be here with you now. So today the objectives are, we're going to review the ambitious science teaching practices. Sometimes I might call them ASTPs, and other times we might call them teacher moves, because these are the moves, these teacher moves are what supports the student moves, the practices, the science and engineering practices. We're going to engage participants will make instructional decisions by eliciting all students' thinking and understanding about scientific ideas, and facilitate making a public record of student thinking and ideas. And our norms for today is that attendance is just like in person, meaning that everyone's engaged, engagement for all. And we'll ask that you stay muted during a lot of the times, because sometimes we have background noise. You might get background noise here, and I apologize for that. We'll ask that you keep your camera on, and because you matter, then when prompted, we'll ask you to unmute and to speak and to share in the chat as well. We'll also use some cold calling as well. All right. So you will also notice as we're going through here that we'll have the background slides will be white for most of the time. And that's because, and then other times it'll be lavender. And the reason why there's a color difference in the background is because there's a leadership PD. And so we're going to be asking you to fill 2 roles today. Those 2 roles are that you're going to be a learner and you're going to be a facilitator. in the future. The lavender slides are going to be where we're reflecting as facilitators and planning as facilitators. And then the white background slides will be where we're thinking in terms of being learners. And the white slides are the ones that you're going to be presenting. When you present, you won't present the lavender slides.
So this
And
morning,
on that, sorry, Erica, go ahead.
this morning, we're going to ask you to watch this video and notice and wonder. So what do you notice and wonder? And can you use scientific reasoning to support an explanation for why this is happening? So let's take a look, and then afterwards, we'll ask you to share your thoughts.
Would you please share sound?
There's no sound on this one.
There is, but
Oh, there is? I did share sound. I don't hear anything here. Should I play it again?
well, that's okay. We're still observing.
Imagine the sound.
So despite the fact that there was no sound, you did see what was happening. So what do you notice and wonder, and what scientific reasoning might we have to explain what's happening? You can unmute, share out, place it in the chat. We have Miss Kim mentioning energy from sound waves. Okay. Another connection to energy. We have wondering what causes the vibration. We're seeing perhaps that there's motion and energy involved. Vibration, vibrating motion. Thank you for sharing. This is something that we're going to be coming back to as we look at our video series, our secondary video series later today. But just to take on that view as learners, right? What do we notice and wonder? This is something we want our students to be able to engage in as well. So this is something you've seen. We're going to be focusing on all of these instructional levers for today. So we've talked about the deep clarity of learning goals when we talk about our planning as teachers, building our precision of pedagogy, and shifting our practice into high capacity building. And all of that really is centered on student voice, right? How are we engaging our students in that way? That's all right, we can move forward. So again, another slide you've seen before, we talked about the anchoring phenomenon always being that basis for how we are approaching our science teaching. So it's that backbone for our unit, forming that storyline where our students engage in the multiple lessons, the activities, and investigate a phenomenon to construct their knowledge and develop an explanation. So connecting it to real world, real life, something that they can really understand and engage in. And as they go through that storyline, they're learning through the lessons. They have opportunities to revise their models and explanations from before and build on, and in the end really come to that final causal explanation, that gapless explanation. So then moving on, we see that when we talk about our next gen science standards, we're talking about 3 dimensions. So that first one being our domains, right? What are the disciplinary core ideas? What do we want our students to know? I think it needs to pop up. There we go. What do we want our students to try to figure out, right? These are our DCIs. Then our SCPs. How are our students trying to figure that out? What are they going to do to figure out the DCIs? And last but not least, taking on the lens as scientists, how are they going to think about it? And all of this is, of course, anchored in that anchoring phenomenon, the storylines, why they're trying to figure it out. Connecting this then to just the science and engineering practices, we have 8 across grade levels, K through 12. So these are the ways that we really want our students to do the science, right? We want them to ask questions, define problems, ASTP2, develop and use models. And the core 3 that we're really going to be looking at in LD East are, on the next slide, we have SCPs. Yes, the student moves, thank you. The student moves, SCPs 2, developing and using models, 6, constructing explanations and designing solutions, and 7, engaging in argumentation from evidence. And that common thread across all 3 is the claim, evidence, and reasoning. And so these are our student moves. So how are we as teachers then going to help our students to engage in these practices? We are going to engage in the ambitious science teaching practices. So that wheel, that quadrant, you'll see our planning for engagement, eliciting students' ideas, supporting their ongoing changes in thinking, and pressing for evidence-based explanations. This is kind of our placemat for these ambitious science teaching practices, a quick read. So when we're talking about planning for engagement with important science ideas, we're really going back to the core of that phenomenon, planning that unit around that phenomenon that explains something happening in the real world. We don't just teach a topic such as chemical reactions. We're really connecting it to, well, why is the bike rusting when I placed it outside? What's happening? We're not just talking about a topic of photosynthesis, but we're really engaging in a real world phenomenon of how the seed is becoming a tree, how these plants are growing. Then we elicit their ideas, have them explain how and why. That's that initial thinking that they might have. And then supporting that thinking as it changes throughout the unit, using all of these lessons to explain it, to revise, to come back and engage in argumentation. And then, of course, pressing for evidence-based explanations. Now that they've built up all this knowledge, how can they use that evidence to create that final gapless explanation? I'm going to pass it on to In-Young here.
Thanks, Erica. So as promised, we have a middle school, a secondary example for you so that you can share this video series with your colleagues. And this one focuses on the phenomena we just saw in the quick video of how speakers work. So just like you did before, we're going to be looking for evidence of these teacher practices. Please keep in mind the following. The DCI is motion and stability. And the phenomenon is not only how do speakers work, but what causes them to vibrate. And within this unit, you're going to see the use of SCPs 2, 6, and 7. Be on the lookout for evidence of teacher moves. So here's the first segment of this 8th grade class.
All right, so they need the coil attached to the battery. They need the magnets showing the poles.
Yes.
They need, I think, the speaker adjacent to the coil,
I like that too.
showing the vibrations. I think that's important.
Yeah, because I think that ultimately shows, like, that ultimately answers the question that, like, this pushing and pulling is causing that speaker to vibrate,
Right.
which is, like, the bigger thing.
Helps ground them. You know, the kids who are a little bit confused, like, oh, wait, that's why we care about it.
Right.
Alligator clips. Beautiful. How much are you connected to that?
No, they're supposed to be two alligator clips. Two alligator squares.
Okay.
No, alligator clips, not oxygen.
Okay.
And the coil.
Coil wire.
The coil. All right. I have a question. We're even showing the coil on a lot of these, like head on, like with a circle. But if we want to be showing those forces, it's hard to show the forces coming out of it.
Oops, sorry. So what you just saw was the beginning of the unit and the end to kind of give you a bird's eye view of the whole thing. This is evidence of the first teaching practice. Now, how did the teacher plan for engagement with the phenomenon? And what was the evidence you saw at the beginning and end of the unit? If you could prepare your thoughts in chat. And as always, you're welcome to unmute and share your thoughts aloud as well. Evidence of hands-on.
In the beginning, they mentioned when they were planning together that they were trying to gain student interest, and they mentioned a coil and a magnet. And I forgot what they said exactly. But they said that that'll catch their interest.
Mm-hmm. So they were planning for parts that they knew would capture students' interest. Wonderful, thank you. By the way, these students saw the same video that we did at the beginning with our noticing and wondering. So with that in mind, let's look at the second clip. Ms. Apostle said that she liked how the students were engaged in discussion. Thank you. So here we go. The second clip is going to show us how the teacher is strategically making sure to elicit students' ideas. Please be on the lookout for evidence of how you know this is going on.
Because
Read it first. Let me see it, Alex. 5 read off yours while we're reading. Okay.
doesn't make sense.
What is the copper's job on the speaker? What does it do?
I think that, what is the what's part? What's the job? The copper. So we're talking about the copper that actually makes up the wire. Does that have a job? I think that's a really important question. It's made out of copper, right? We noticed it was the same material on both speakers, right? Maybe there's something to that. Why do you think it's copper, by the way? Anyone have any? Does it have to be copper? I don't know. Like maybe we should test something like that, right? Okay, put that up there. All right, you had that in your mind. No one else had a question like that. So when you have something that no one else has, that's not something to be embarrassed about, Markel. That's something that like might push us in the right direction, right? So be proud of that. Okay. I want to remind you guys of some of our expectations here. When we're doing this, we got to make sure we're respectful and listening to one another's ideas. We have some amazing ideas. Josh, you want to grab a stool at the table? First time we did this, I remember Markel had a question. I think I brought this up once or twice since. Remember? That you didn't want to share with us at all. Going into that copper about that copper coil, right? And it turns out like investing in that copper coil was really important, wasn't it? Because sometimes the best questions come from ideas that people maybe don't think are that you want to share them. So I'm going to encourage you, if you've got an idea, especially if it's different, to be sharing it with us. All right? Because sometimes it leads to the most learning. All right? I'm going to
Oh, wonderful. We already have some offerings in the chat. One thing I was not able to recognize whole group was before this clip, Carmelita mentioned that she saw collaboration between two teachers as they planned. And there's an offering in the chat, a question of, is there co-teaching going on? So you do see a couple of adults in here working together to facilitate the students' learning. Some evidence that the teacher was eliciting students' ideas. Some of you have already started to drop your thoughts in here. Entertaining student wonderings about whether the wire needs to be copper. The teacher probes students for ideas, especially that might be different, or they might feel like it doesn't matter. In the setup of the classroom, Carmelita mentioned that this looks like a Socratic seminar type setup. Wonderful. So you saw that the first half of the clip was from day one of the unit, eliciting that student's ideas and especially making sure that it's public to the group. And then circling back to that idea mid-unit when they were discovering things about that copper wire that seemed to matter. Wonderful. All right, so when we do have a breakout room icon here, and we will, this would be a great spot later when you are facilitating in your school back with your colleagues. This would be one of those sessions that we could really develop into a breakout session or a longer reflection point, because there's so much going on here in this segment that relates back to student voice, which we're working to develop with our instructional foci. Craig, would we have a moment to go into our breakout rooms for this to discuss further? Okay, so we're going to meet together to expand a little bit on how the teacher was eliciting student ideas here and perhaps reflecting on how we might be able to transfer that into our own classrooms. Breakout for, I believe, 4 minutes, right, Craig? Great. Here we go. I totally forgot. Oh, it's recording again. Everyone, anything else you gleaned from this video with your breakout group? Any further evidence you saw of the teacher eliciting students' ideas, or how the teacher is eliciting students' ideas?
I think it's about creating a culture where participation is welcome, right? So I think our group spoke about, lowering the effective filter in the classroom so that any kind of idea is welcome. Another colleague brought up the point that, all students, even including us as educators, we expect to be right all the time. And, that kind of culture sort of defeats the purpose of communication and trying to, bring about a culture where students can participate freely without a worry of being judged by an answer that they provide. So that's, I think, what was important in this discussion.
Thank you, Mr. De Leon. That's a lot to think about, right? Would anyone like to add on to his comment or share something new?
I would just like to add on to the fact that
to have this kind of conversation among your students and with you will take a lot of, I don't think it happened overnight. This might have, he might have experienced all kinds of crickets before this level, to even for a brave student to actually ask a question when he thought it's something, you know how it is. You're right, Pedro, when you said we always want to be right. Do we ask the correct question, or do we answer the correct answer? Things like that. But yeah, I think this did not just happen overnight to have this kind of setup.
Thank you, Ms. Puno. And that, it's not just about the students' comfort or discomfort, it's ours too, right? So you're right. There were probably moments when there were crickets, and this took a lot of work. And it really challenges us to work through our own discomfort of wanting students to talk a certain way or for things to go a certain way. Thank you for honoring that there's growth for all of us in this.
Especially now, Leah and Inyang, I want to add that especially now after pandemic, I observe that, students actually, in general, in majority, they just want to be there working, with their laptop or Chromebook. And sometimes you really try to encourage them to speak, and only a few students are responding. I don't know if that was the effect of virtual learning after maybe 1.5 years. So I guess right now we're just, again, is starting our students to move forward to this ambitious setup. But it's really a good thing. I love this because before pandemic, we're doing this kind of format, this different strategy sharing together. So in fact, the Socratic seminar, I was doing this previously before pandemic with my higher grade level, and it works a little bit for some students. Sometimes it depends on your students as well, in order to accumulate a lot of response from other students. But Juliet is right. This will not happen in one night. You need to practice over and over until it will become perfect.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. We have both the honor and responsibility to give our students the opportunities for experiences like this. And it's definitely not clean. It does take a lot of messy work in the beginning. Thank you so much. I love Mr. Apostle's comment about how, those things, they don't stop us from engaging in practicing in the science and engineering practices with our kids. Thank you. All right, so let's go on to the third segment. And this time we're going to be looking at how the teacher plans to support ongoing changes in students' thinking. If you recall from our first session before winter break, this was the heart of science instruction for us, right? We get to support students' changes in thinking. That's our role as teachers. So let's take a look at how the teacher is able to facilitate this.
When you flip it, like when it pulls like away, it's like a negative thing.
So like we're saying like a pushing force.
Yeah.
Right, okay. Joshua?
I have a question. When you said what you said, do you mean like if the coil isn't magnetic, what would the magnet have anything to do with it? Is that what you meant? Yeah, then I agree, because if the coil isn't really magnetic, then the magnet can't do anything but just sit there.
I mean, it does do something. It makes it work.
Speak louder so we can all hear.
I mean, it does do something. It makes it like louder, I guess, or it makes it work. It makes it run.
But coil, yeah, but you can't. You could say it doesn't have. You could say it has something to do with it, but you can't really say it's like the main cause, because we basically just agreed that the coil isn't magnetic, and you didn't respond to that. And what I'm thinking is that the magnet isn't the main thing that's making the sound. Like like the wires are important, but nobody's saying that that's the main thing. Well, it has something to do with it, but not everybody's focused on the magnet. So, like what I'm saying is that the magnet is necessary, but it's not the most important thing. Yeah, exactly that. But what I'm saying is that it's not the main thing that we should focus. Like, it's not the most important piece, but it's still necessary. Like the wires are necessary, but we're not focused on that the way we are on the magnet.
Can you guys speak up a little bit? I think you're having a good discussion. I want us to be able to hear. What's your question, Garden?
So what is the most important?
I don't know. Could be. I think it is the wire. No, because it could be the coil. Because without the wire, probably the wires.
Let's hear from Markel. He's had his hand up a little bit.
I feel like that, in my opinion, like everything has like its important role to like the wires brings like the electricity to the iPad or the source or whatever.
Actually, I think I'm more agree with Markel. I think everything, there's not like one most important thing. I think everything's sort of equal because without like the coil, the speaker wouldn't work. And without the magnet, the speaker wouldn't work. So everything relies on each other.
I agree because the wires kind of have to like they attach to the source, and the magnet kind of without the magnet you can't really hear any sounds, and so that's why you need like everything.
Well, I'll tell you what. It sounds like we've got some good ideas. It sounds like we've got some agreement on certain things. It sounds like we're disagreeing on certain things, and we need to investigate more. So I'm going to tell you what we're going to finish up today with, and then what we'll do tomorrow. Tomorrow, I want to get all these questions out. I want to figure out where are our questions, what can we do to answer the questions? So like, what can we investigate?
All right, so let's share our evidence. How did the teacher support students' ongoing changes in thinking about the phenomenon?
You know,
Yeah.
again, it's about, I was going to say, it's about creating a culture where this Socratic seminar gets to a moment where students are participating without judgment. It's like the conversations that they have with each other. They can agree with each other. They can disagree with each other. And by the teacher probing them to ask more questions, leads to other students coming up with further questions. And I noticed towards the end of this clip, you know, he doesn't stop there. He will take their questions and use it to plan for the next lesson, right? Or to accommodate for the next lesson. And I think that's a little bit more organic rather than, okay, this is my lesson plan. This is what I'm going to do. I'll come back to these questions whenever I have time. And yeah, that's what I noticed.
I love that comment about it being organic, Mr. De Leon. Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to point out some of the things in the chat that are streaming in that the teacher, you know, he really limited his role in this, right? So he was there to guide the student thinking, but it was really nice to see that students are engaging with each other, answering each other's questions, that they were thinking creatively with each other. Seemed like academic science vocabulary was coming out, not necessarily specifically elicited by the teacher, but was just part of the students speaking with one another, right? Thank you for sharing these thoughts. Would anyone like to unmute and voice further, adding on or different idea? Is it possible to answer your question about the video audio versus the captioning? Yeah, the generic student numbering is just for honoring students' anonymity, but yeah, they're calling each other by name in the video. Yeah. All right. So then we have a fourth segment. And for this one, we're looking at how the teacher is pressing students for evidence-based explanations so that they can really work towards a constructed final explanation.
All right. What are some things that we need to definitely put up as part of this? Yeah.
We should somehow show like electricity going to the battery to the wire.
All right. Do you guys all agree we should show electricity and a battery in the wire? Yeah?
Wait, we're doing step by step, or like just.
Well, I want to be able to put a model up here.
Yeah, I know, but
right. Do you agree with what Markel said? All right. Does everyone agree that we should put a battery up there?
No. iPad.
An iPad?
The iPad,
Right.
no, but it doesn't switch the current.
Say that again?
The battery doesn't switch the current.
The battery doesn't switch the current, so you're saying the iPad switches the current. Is that important to figuring out how the speaker works? Okay, so what should we show it connected to?
Battery.
I'm still hearing battery and iPad. Why should it be the battery and why should it be the iPad?
iPad can switch the current.
And what? What's that?
It switches current?
Right, remember from the reading?
Oh, I thought, no, because Anthony said that something about.
What? Said that.
Oh, never mind, that makes so much sense now, yeah.
All right, and why is that important that the iPad switches the currents? Why does that matter?
Vibrations.
The magnet.
Hold on, you are skipping step 1 and step 2 and you're going straight to step 3. I agree that switching the current gets the vibrations, but how? What are the steps in between? So it switches between repulsive and attractive forces, which cause the vibrations, which causes... Perfect. All right. So I'm going to draw an iPad in here. I'm just going to put it over here. Does that sound okay? I know what you guys are thinking. That looks exactly like an iPad.
No.
You're welcome. I'm brilliant. What should be connected to the iPad? What do we say?
The aux cord.
The aux cord. Beautiful. And what's connected to that?
All right, what evidence did you see? So there's a lot of asking questions. The teacher is modeling for the whole group on the board. The students read a book that they seem to have a reference source. Yeah, everything is based on student input. You're right. And this is toward the very end of the unit. It actually says the last day. So they're working together to create a whole class consensus model at the end with evidence that they've collected throughout the unit. I love that we see the students justifying their reasoning, like Ms. Kim said. Thank you. All right, so this is a summary of the teacher moves in that secondary setting, like we promised. We have one final clip for you, and this really summarizes the teacher's point of view and the student's point of view of a unit conducted like this.
You can really be scared to put the power in the student's hands. You know, that's not traditionally, especially in a middle school, like where kids are just crazy. We know middle school kids are crazy, and so asking them to, you know, basically develop everything that we're going to learn in the unit is unthinkable at some level, right? The magnetic field that the kids are starting to draw and understand, like I didn't see that till I was in college. And to think that, you know, middle school kids are going to be able to do that, that when I first saw that, I'm like, yeah, right, that'd be nice if they could come up with that and think about that. But they really did. Like they really did develop everything through this unit, and that's powerful. And that, I think, what the hope is that it's not just the open SciEd units themselves that are going to be taught this way, but that these lessons, these practices can be applied towards every lesson, towards every unit. Maybe teach something a little bit different next time you go and teach, unit X, Y, Z, where it is relying more on the students, where it's not verified by the right answer at the end of the class. And I think, the ways that I've seen certain students just change and their eyes light up in a way that they don't during a more traditional science unit. It's so powerful. And this is how kids develop a love of science.
Like during the speaker unit, we were going over how the speaker worked, and yeah, we were going over how the speaker worked itself, and we weren't really guided by the teacher. We made our own path, so it was more difficult, but it's not like we were just reading off a piece of paper, and I think we learned more from it.
I feel like it's better because it's in a higher level of science, where we're the scientists. We have to figure out stuff. What my class did in this unit that I would like to see in other just classes in general is working together. We work together a little bit, and basically how the students did lead the class a lot. I would like to see the kids and students leading the class a lot more than they usually do.
And why do you like that, leading the class?
I like leading the class.
For all subjects?
It's good because it gives the students the basic skill of leadership and independence.
Whoops, sorry. This is my favorite clip of the whole series here, because we really get to see the perspectives of the teacher and the students, right? The teacher mentioned that this is an open SciEd unit. In the presentation deck that we put a link for at the beginning, and we'll provide it again, in the speaker notes of these sections, you will see references and links to discovering more about this open SciEd unit if you'd like. Open SciEd in general is a resource where you can find a lot of phenomena-based units for secondary science instruction. So we have a closing question for you. So on the next slide, we're going to invite you to think again about student voice. So we know that's at the center of the local district East instructional foci. How is student voice amplified in these learning experiences?
Do you want to comment, or is this more of a thing that we think about, or?
We always want to hear your thoughts.
Well, I think the second student who spoke, who mentioned that he felt like a scientist, I think that to me spoke a lot in what student voice is. And the reason why is because I believe he reached a level of identity, right? He noticed that he felt like a scientist, right? And I think in the classroom that's very powerful. It's not only about the scientists who are only white or specific, come from a specific demographic, and for them to believe that they are scientists themselves speaks volumes.
Oh, I have to applaud that. Thank you so much for that. Resonates very much with me, your comments on that. Thank you. Would anyone else like to build on or share a different idea? Ms. Apostle shared an offering in the chat as well. it's very moving to see the student interviews in general. Yeah, it was definitely a key moment for me too, in really seeing the purpose of these ambitious science teaching practices, why we want to do what we do in a student-centered way. Thank you. So on that note, we're going to look at the purpose of our ambitious science teacher practices again, that at the heart of it is equity, that we want to change the way that we teach because it really gives students a voice. So how are we doing that? We are situating learning in familiar contexts. We're building in those opportunities to be responsive to their ideas, their own personal experiences, their questions, right? There was disciplinary conversation all throughout. The focus was on students working out what they think and know by talking, right? The sense making. And we can really focus our instruction on student talk to make sure that they're at the center. So I wonder how long this unit lasted from beginning to end. I believe that they do list the amount of days if you click on the links in the speaker notes for the unit. I believe it was between 2 to 3 weeks of instruction. But of course, we would need to develop our own pace or calendar according to the needs of our students, right? So we are back to that reflection point for you as leaders. You may recall from our first meeting, we asked you to think about how you are going to facilitate taking this learning back to your colleagues. So thinking of this entire segment where we were reviewing the AST practices through the lens of secondary instruction, especially with this video series, what are some key points you want to highlight? What are some logistical or planning issues to consider, alternate protocols that might work better for your colleagues? And what do you anticipate from your colleagues? What are some possible teacher responses or potential challenges that you can consider and make adjustments before you plan to take this back to them? We invite you to go into your breakout rooms to discuss these reflection points, and a summary of that is in the chat for you. And we'll see you back in a few minutes. Any questions about what we're doing? If not, please join your breakout rooms.
Sorry, I thought you were done, so I sent them.
That's fine.
All right, I'm going to jump into a room. I'm going to go to room number 1.
How many rooms are there?
And yeah, the questions were the reflections for leaders. I think Lee and Young posted them. And the questions are, what are the key points we want to make sure to highlight with this activity? What are some logistical planning issues to consider when we facilitate this activity? What are some alternate protocols we might use for this activity and why? What are some possible teacher responses or potential challenges to consider when planning for this activity?
I want to highlight,
yeah,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. No,
I
go
want to
ahead.
highlight wait time. Because personally, I guess my patience sometimes runs out. Like, how long do I have to wait for the students to respond to my question? So I'm kind of like, okay, let me just give you the answer, so then we can move on. Okay, but so that's personally my own reflection when we do this. It's the wait time. So we did the lab. I never realized that a lab that I realized that we will only be doing for a good 1 week lasted for a week and a half. And it still is a challenge. So I have to build upon that in order for me to, I need growth as well in this thing. So this has been a good meeting for all of us, so wait time, definitely. And give them the space to really think and
Reflections.
Well, I heard my colleagues having, I think the apprehension comes to the buy-in of everyone in the group, in the department, which is true to almost every single department, I guess.
Yes.
Especially if it's not, again, if it's the culture of the classroom, it's also the culture of the department that goes a long way. If you really want to have this kind of conversation happening, you know.
Such a good point.
It's hard.
Yeah, each department has their own culture. You're right.
Very true.
I just want to speak about being in a small school is so limiting. Like, I hope this is going to be the venue. I see Mr. De Leon here, and we are in the same complex. I hope that through this time that we are both here and we represent both our schools, that it becomes the beginning of collaboration amongst ourselves. Because again, it's kind of like you're just in your zone. This is the only time that I get to speak with other teachers from other schools, but just to be the only chemistry teacher in my floor, in my school, I don't get to collaborate with any other teacher other than being here. So it would be so great to bring back the old days when I used to be at my old HP high school, when we have PLCs. Okay, and in that PLCs, you get to collaborate with many brains, many minds of teachers, and you get to see like what they are doing, how you can potentially steal that strategy and use it in your own room, type of thing. I know this is great. However, I miss those opportunities, those kind of experiences like that helps every teacher. Because like if you're just in your own zone, you think like you're doing the best, but actually you're not, because you don't see what others are doing. So maybe we can break those barriers, especially if you are in small schools like I do, because we also have to deal with admin issues. Like, I don't know how the admins want to deal with it, type of thing. And I don't know how on your end on the district can potentially help us with this type of thing. Like all science teachers, maybe once a semester or whatever in that same complex can actually work together, because we serve the same community after all. We just don't serve the same school, but we serve the same community.
Ms. Apostle, your comments are making me wonder on my end too. What is there that we can do in terms of facilitating learning like this by connecting within campuses? Because like you said, your campus is in a special structure, or even connecting within communities of schools in the cost model. Yeah, that's a lot to think about in terms of facilitation, because it's not just about meeting with other teachers on our own campus. Each of us are in unique positions depending on how that's structured. Thank you for sharing that. Would anyone else like to add on or share a different idea?
I'm from Bell. I'm sorry. Sorry. So I'm from Bell. We're a big school. So there are actually 15 of us. The buy-in is still a little bit a problem. But at one point in time, in the future, I don't know when, because this pandemic time is so hard, okay, to keep the teachers together. They're apprehensive doing activities with the situations that's going on. We have tried. It's good that unlike the small schools, we can plan, we can do PLC. Our teachers are cooperative, but in a sense, will they implement? We've tried hard, but I think the most challenging part right now with what's happening, it's hard to focus on ambitious science. We have been attending this for quite some time with Craig, even before. I do like it. I do like the ones we saw in the video, but hope the challenge is the situation that we're in right now. And also in the future, if there really come a time that you can meet us face to face, the district, I think that's the best way to be able to get teacher buy-in when all of us are like from before. I remember going to LDEs, we're just one big group participating. For me, that's the easiest way I can learn. And if the teachers come, it's much easier and they would understand, okay, this whole ambitious science practice. I'm for actually doing or being in this one day training that we used to have. Thank you.
Maria, you
Yes.
say you're from Bell High School?
Yeah, I'm from Bell.
Yeah, I actually serve the BCM community, so we can definitely work out some ways that I can connect with your staff.
Yeah, you can come to
Yeah.
us.
Yes, I'd love to do that.
Yeah, and the principal is our admin, actually, science admin.
All
So
right.
it's a little bit advantage.
Sounds good. We're gonna have to
Okay.
connect later.
Okay, thank you.
May I add on? So I don't know if the Ambitious Science Teaching book mentions this, but they do talk about science improvement tools. And I know a cohort of math teachers, convened together to come up with like this science improvement tool to improve practices in their math classrooms. So, with CAS, the community schools surrounding our communities, I think it would be an important or a valuable experience to have like a set of group of people like us convene to set that up. I think with the idea of starting small and then expanding and using that as a model, it would be an amazing thing to do.
Absolutely. So developing it more in a cadre model form. Absolutely. Yeah, that's something we can. So your community schools science coach is Miss Nava, and we can definitely make sure that you're able to connect with her with that idea as well. Thank you so much.
I work at a small school also, so I'm the only chemistry teacher and there are only 2 science teachers, but we do work in a PLC. We started this year. So I understand where Ms. Apostle is coming from. However, we are working a PLC, and for this model, I think we can definitely implement this as a PLC, although we're teaching different subjects, because the focus is on the phenomenon. I think maybe I misunderstood. So for example, photosynthesis, we could both work on it as a phenomenon, but because the other teacher teaches biology, he could focus on the biological aspect and I could focus on the chemistry aspect, and we can still plan together to elicit student creativity and student discussion, but in a different perspective.
Thank you for that offering. You're right. And the practices themselves, they lend to any discipline of science, right? Any branch of science is going to require students to discover things. Horizontal articulation, yes. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your engagement, everyone. On that note, we are ready for our 5-minute break. So we invite you to refuel, refresh, and we'll see you back in 5.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Hope you had a nice little break. So we're gonna pick up now and transition into eliciting students' voice. How do we facilitate that? So we're gonna start off with this video. We're gonna play a short little video here, and we're gonna ask you to notice and to wonder, and then to share your noticing and your wondering. So I'm gonna press play. Think about what you're seeing. What do you wonder from that? And can you use scientific reasoning to support an explanation for why this is happening? But first, just noticings and wonderings. Okay. So in the chat, then type in, what are some things that you noticed? First, what did you notice? So what are some things that you actually observed? And after you type something that you noticed, then type in if there's a wondering. What might you wonder based on what you saw? Give you a couple, give you a minute to do that. All right, good. So we've got some noticing here. So Young Mai says the wheels went up. Jules said speeding up fast. Maria, speeding, agrees. Carmelita says speed. And then some wondering, starting to get some wonderings in here. So do wheels, from Young Mai, do wheels actually slow down motion? And Jules offers, how far above the track does a train go? Up. Okay. Thank you. So now, this is how we would begin something new with students, some new phenomenon with the students. We would show them something and then give them an opportunity to share their noticings and wonderings. And then give them an opportunity to actually dig in a little bit more, to explore their noticings and their wonderings and try to develop some sort of a initial causal idea. So here on the screen, what you see is a template. So this is a modeling template for modeling, where students are going to model their ideas about what's happening here. So you'll see that one thing that we like to do with modeling is if the phenomenon lends itself this way, then that there's like a before and a during and an after. Here the question is, draw what's happening, what can we see, and what can't we see, and what we can't see. And so in the first little picture there has space to draw what we can see and what we can't see when the train rises, and then as the train is floating, and then as the train settles back down, falls. Then it's asking the students how and why the train rises, floats, and falls, and then does this remind them of something? What does it remind them of? So this is what we would give to students to get their initial thinking out there. In the interest of our own time here, what we're going to do is we're just going to do a simplified version of this template. Instead of the before, during, and after, we're just going to do just one piece here, just one picture. So in the chat, In-Young has placed a link to a PDF, and you can open up this PDF and go into Kami if you have Kami, and you can start drawing in there. We're asking you to either use Kami, or you could even open up Google Slide, the Google Slide that's there, and you can scribble on Google Slide. Let me show you here. So either use the PDF and open up Kami if you have Kami, or open up the Google Slide, and then you can use the scribble tool. But we're going to ask you to actually take a few minutes and draw in on here things that you're seeing and things that you can't see. So what's happening? Use pictures, arrows, and words to put down the observable and the unobservable about how this train floats. Let's see here. We're going to give you, how much time are we giving? We're going to put you into a breakout room where you can discuss for 3 minutes and then develop your model. If you want, you can all work as one for 5 minutes. It's going to be an 8-minute breakout. So 3 minutes to discuss and then 5 minutes to put some ideas onto the virtual paper there. Any questions before we go? All right, let's break out room. We'll see you in 8 minutes. Okay, welcome back. So we know we didn't give you enough time, especially with the digital tools, to do a lot of drawing and modeling. But hopefully you were able to get something done with thinking through, talking together, collaborating, getting some ideas onto the digital paper there. If we were doing this in person, then I would think about, I would definitely have like pieces of paper for you to write on, because it's just so, it lowers that digital hurdle. But given that you had a little bit of time to talk, is there anything that you'd like to share in terms of like how you think this is working? Did anyone scribble anything down? Were you able to, group one, did you get something down onto any of the digital paper there? Pedro, I think that's your group, right?
Okay, yeah, I was wondering like how we know our group numbers. I didn't realize.
No, that's fine.
But yeah, we were, I could share what we.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and share screen.
All right. Okay, I am not the expert in the group, but we did talk about, having magnets located on the railings or on the train tracks, quote unquote, continuously, obviously having positive and negative ends. I wrote down here electromagnets. Obviously, these are powered both by magnetism and electricity. And then you also have magnets along the vehicle itself. That's what's creating this, opposite forces to create motion. So I believe one of my colleagues also mentioned that gravity is also at play when the levitation or the pulling down of the vehicle happens. And once enough friction has been created to set the vehicle in motion through the wheels, then the vehicle begins to levitate and friction is reduced. And that's what creates this motion with opposing change in potential between the magnets and the vehicle. So
thank you. Your group is positing that the rising of the train and the moving of the train is potentially due to magnets, pushes and pulls of magnets.
And electricity, yes.
And electricity. Okay.
Yeah.
And then gravity pulls it back down to the tracks. Okay.
Correct.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much for putting that idea out there. That is one possible idea of how this works. Group number 2, can you share some of your thinking?
All right, group number 2, we didn't get to the discussion on why things are going that way they are, but we just looked first at the forces acting on the train. So I'm going to share my screen. So this is what we saw, or what we decided that for right now, so weight is there, and applied force, whatever that force is, what causes that force, these two are equal because it's levitating. And we are assuming here that the levitation is constant all throughout. It's not going up or down, it's just the levitation. That's the assumption. So therefore, applied force going up is equal to the weight pulling down. And then it's going forward at a certain acceleration because it's speeding up. Therefore, the forward force caused by whatever is powering it is greater, way greater than the air resistance in which this is cutting through. This is where we got so far.
Okay, great. So you took some initial steps in thinking about how or what the different forces that might be in play. And then the next would be, what forces are these that are causing it to move forward and causing it to rise? Okay, so that's good. In both of your representations there, we saw some things that we could see from the video, and then there were some things that we couldn't see. We didn't see the arrows that you were using, Jules. That those weren't visible, right? Those were things that your group came up with. And group number 1, Pedro, we didn't see magnets in there, but you posited that there might be magnets that are causing the movement. So these are things that we couldn't see, but you're thinking about what might be going on there. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to go back to sharing my screen here. So, so this is what we just did. We just did sort of an initial, sort of a quick run through of an initial sequence here of putting out a phenomenon and getting the initial ideas going for students, providing that opportunity for them. So we're going to give you an opportunity to go into breakouts now, where you're going to think about what are the key points we want to make sure to highlight in this activity when we do this with our learners back in our departments. What are some logistical and planning issues to consider when facilitating this activity? What are some alternate protocols you might use for this activity and why? What are some possible teacher responses or potential challenges to consider when planning this activity? I think In Young, do you have it available to paste those questions back in again? Oh, you know what? I have it if you don't. I got it. There we go. Okay, so we're going to send you to breakout room where you can discuss then stepping out in the leadership framework. How are you going to lead this? We're going to give you 4 minutes to do that. We'll see you in 4 minutes. All right,
Why do you do that?
I said 4 minutes and I gave you 2.
Very short.
Why did you do that? Huh?
You know,
Bad.
yeah, no, because I took too long earlier, so I had to. I'm sorry. I apologize. Let's share as a whole group. What are some key points that you want to make sure when you're leading this with your group? What are some key points that you want to highlight?
I guess one of the key things is that be open. Like we acknowledge that every member in the group is as important as yourself. And so therefore we have to be accepting of everyone's idea and not putting their ideas down.
Thank you. That's a very important point.
I also want to highlight what one of our colleagues, Ms. Kim, mentioned. I don't know if you want to talk about it yourself, Ms. Kim, or do you want me to say it for you?
You could share with them. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So I think she brings up a really good point about, you, for example, put us through this experience of like trying to figure out how this magnetic levitation vehicle works, right? And so I think putting ourselves in with a student hat and trying to figure things out gives a teacher perspective as to like what are some things that the student might struggle through before beginning a lesson. So I think that experience within itself is important for teachers to understand prior to engaging a lesson with or units with their students. Thank you, Ms. Kim.
Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're just actually starting sharing in group 2 that I can see this ambitious skills activity very similar to PIRE chemistry. Do you still remember when we did PIRE from Michigan State, wherein it seems that it will start with driving questions, and from there you're going to get the prior knowledge of the students, and then afterwards you can start investigation by doing some kind of experiments, putting some additional reading, and from there actually you can really elicit students' ideas. I can see that kind of a pattern. It's a good one. I love that actually. In fact, that curriculum from PIRE, and I know that there are some teachers from here like Joy who also did PIRE.
Yeah, thank you. That was a pilot program that we had through Michigan State STEM Create, and hopefully those units are going to be available whole scale soon. But you were part of a pilot process. Thank you for being a part of that. So in particular, this is something that Katerina was talking about earlier, key points. How do we provide those opportunities for students who may be resistant to sharing their ideas, who don't want to put their ideas out there in front of the whole class? So one, you give them that time and space for them to get their ideas, just to think about them. Two, pair share, because they can talk so much easier to a pair within a pair with a peer than in the whole group. And then three, you can give them, then even put them into groups and give them roles. I think Pedro was talking about this, or it could have been another person, sorry. You put them in groups and have group roles, and somebody shares out from the group. Every group shares. And then four, you have that whole class. So those ways of lowering lowering that pressure on the student to share a whole class, giving them the opportunity to share it together, right? It helps to, and then giving them the roles that they have to share out is one way of doing that. Then of course, number 5, that template for the modeling. All right. So thank you for sharing your ideas with us. I'm going to hand off to Erica.
So what you were just mentioning about prior, we're really talking about how our main objective in teaching science is to support our students' thinking, changes in students' thinking over time, right? Their initial model, their initial thinking explanation, it can and should change. They're not going to have all the information that we're going to build up to it in that storyline model. So you'll see that anchoring phenomenon with that planning that we have our students, that we do for how our students are going to engage in that science idea, and then how we're going to then elicit, it should change. And that by the end, when they get to that final causal gapless explanation, it's going to have the layers of all that evidence that we've collected over time. So we want our students to know that, yes, it's okay to be incorrect or just have a partial understanding, because over time we're going to build on that. So that leads us into really getting into the eliciting students' ideas of how we're going to elicit their partial understandings, maybe select ideas to make public, and then adapt further instruction based on what we see. So what we initially see in some of these student models is are different aspects of the what's happening, right? Something that they might be able to see. Then we get into the how a little bit deeper. There's a little bit deeper of an understanding of how that phenomenon is happening. And then we really want to push our students to get into the why, right? Why does this fundamentally work the way that they do? And you as teachers, you kind of already get into the how and the why, right? But a lot of our students might just start with the what, and that's fine. But how are we going to elicit further thinking and their changes over time? So that next slide just kind of is an overview of these three phases. We want to build up students' understanding to go beyond just the what and into the how and the why. So they may have partial understandings, and they could be alternative conceptions. They might be just using everyday language and experiences rather than maybe the key terms and scientific language that we want them to gain and understand. Maybe they're building on previous science ideas or their own analogies to things that they have experience with. Using those three kind of layers, we might even conduct then a gallery walk, right? We see some of these initial thinkings, our next slide, and we see, okay, maybe some of our students have similar ways of understanding these initial thoughts. So allow them time to walk around to see. It validates what they're thinking, and it allows them to have the time and the space to understand how their peers are also understanding things. So we can use colored Post-its, maybe a red Post-it for them to jot down a new idea they didn't think about, and a green Post-it for ideas that are the same or similar to theirs. It really just helps them to visualize and, it, like I said, validate, right? And you might even see that there are possible hypotheses that can be drawn from these initial models. And that brings us to our next kind of adapting into our instruction, right? If we make these ideas public, I myself as a teacher can see, okay, perhaps we need to work in a small group, have some students work in a small group to build on this modeling, this explanation. Maybe it's a whole class consensus model we're going to work on, or we look at the possible hypotheses, 4 or 5 of them, and then work through them to see what works, what doesn't, what can be supported, what is refuted, and really just build up on these public ideas. And I keep saying that word, but validate their thinking. So then, as I mentioned, we have these possible hypotheses that can be drawn together. And when you know what the kids are thinking, when you understand where they're coming from, then you know where to go next. So some students were thinking that it's air from the train pushing the track up. Maybe there are rockets involved, or maybe magnets, right? So you'll know, okay, these students I need to help build a deeper understanding of, or if they've already gotten to that initial possible explanation. Now, how can I get them to understand the how and the why and to show that? So then we'll adapt our instruction further, leverage their thinking, use these resources of their understandings, their analogies, and then group them. And then especially having students take a stand, really claiming, right? And explaining, because the more that they can have that discourse and exchange thinking with their peers, the more they're going to be able to build up the academic language, be able to have the confidence in discussing with one another and be open to ideas that are not the same as theirs. And that's really what we want them to build up and just be comfortable doing. And this isn't something that we just talk about in science, right? This is just across all levels of thinking and learning. So that's really the idea in adapting our further instruction and having these visible thinking for our students, thinking visible. So here you'll see what the progressions for this DCI might look like from K2 all the way to 9-12. We're going to ask you to explore the elements in your grade span for this floating train phenomenon. And you'll notice this is something that you can see across grade spans, right? We tend to look at things through the lens of what grade we're teaching, what age, but you're going to see that this is something that, at least from grades 3 to 5, you're seeing how this maglev train is connected. So we're asking you to think about what possible partial understandings might your students have, and how would you know that, and what might you do next? So we'll just do a quick read through, maybe identify your element. And because we want to honor your time, we're going to just quickly share maybe 1 or 2 things. And this can be combined with our facilitation slide on the next page. You know, what are some key points that you might want to make sure to highlight with this activity? Why did we talk about the why, how, the what, why, how? What are some logistical planning issues to consider and some possible teacher responses? So rather than go into breakout rooms, we'll just do a quick share out. You can unmute, type in the chat.
I think I don't know. I think one of the key points might be that the focus is not the answer to the phenomenon, but whatever the students are saying, and we can build a lesson off their ideas. So although the air pressure might not have been the key reason, we can make a chemistry lesson out of it to discuss different aspects of science related to that.
That's a great point about it's not always about that right answer. At the very beginning, we're talking about our science engineering practices, right? How are the students going to learn about this? What practices are they engaging in? So yeah, Craig mentions process over content, right? We really want the students to engage in the thinking, to negotiate their understanding. If they disagree, well, how and why? Do you know this? What can you explain about that? We have Miss Apostle mentioning that we're probing students' ideas in the classroom by encouraging that creative thinking among the students, right? And as you saw in the videos earlier, we're the facilitators. We are not meant to have the right answer all the time. We want the kids to reach that understanding on their own, because the self-discovery is really where they grow. They grow. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to have Craig take over because we have a tool that we really want you to have.
Thank you, Erica. Sorry for pressing you to finish your section so quickly. Thank you. So Young's just placed a link into the chat. This is a tool for discourse around this ambitious science teaching practice number 2. It's editable. It's how to plan for eliciting student ideas. It has steps on page, that's 2 pages, it has steps. So just take a second to look at these steps. The steps are in gray. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. So take a second to look at those. Okay, now we're going to watch a quick video. It's 3 minutes, and in this video, have that tool by and see where this teacher actually engages in these different steps. Identify which steps of the teacher engaging in, and what do they do to do it. Ready? Here we go. This is a high school physics on sound.
Ryan is starting a unit on the physics of sound.
Compared to the big one.
Because he wants to work on students' ideas over time, he has to know how they currently think about sound. He elicits this thinking by having his students listen to a few different musical instruments, then attempt an initial model of how musical sound is generated and is detectable by humans. Brian has become skilled at revealing the past experiences and pre-existing ideas his students draw upon. As we listen, we can, for example, hear a wide range of partial understandings his students are using in their sense-making conversations.
For a grand piano, there's there's foot things for it, and you'll have a better sound if the piano was open. I forget what the top's called.
Oh, okay. So we've seen how pianos are open. Yeah. What's happening there?
The hammer.
The hammer's hitting the notes.
Okay. So once that note or the hammer hits the string, how does that sound get out to the audience? Like, what do you guys envision happening there? Like, how is it traveling?
If you hit like a bass drum, the vibration, it travels through the floor, so you can actually feel it on your feet. So that's
okay. So if somebody's out in the audience, do you think that they would feel it in the floor sometimes?
Yeah, sometimes if it's in the air, as the instrument vibrates, it hits the air particles vibrate off each other and
as a molecule.
Spread outward. Yeah, the molecules. They're molecules.
Whatever.
We doing it down here, like everything.
It'll look fine once it's colored in. Don't color it in.
Something.
No, we need to focus on writing.
And then that air vibrates into our ears, which vibrates the bone inside our ear, and our ear transfers the sound into
drum, like drum set.
What is it? Huh?
Those are awesome.
Into something our brain can, understand.
Okay, yeah. So that just means sound waves travel to ears. You should get that part. Sound waves, ears. I don't know if I gotta label ears for him because those are kind of funky looking. Yup. Okay. No, it's not a hole in the middle of the camera. It's just from the front. This thing was this
The research literature confirms that no amount of enthusiastic instruction, nor scientific investigation, nor lab experience will fundamentally change how students think, unless the teacher is able to make student reasoning visible and to incorporate these ideas and experiences into lessons that are aimed at sense-making.
All right, so in looking back then, in just a couple of minutes that we have left, which steps did you see the teacher engage in?
I think we saw the first three. You know, I mean, I did pay attention to the first three. It's the introducing the puzzling event by having different instruments being played, eliciting hypotheses about what might be going on. So those drawings were like evidence of that. And then finally, students trying to explain why those events were happening through their drawings.
Thank you. Thank you. Joy and Maria agree. So thank you. This template is, or this planning tool is very helpful because it lays out the steps, which is very helpful. Then it provides some generic questions that you can ask to your students. And then it provides a space for the teacher to actually think of questions that are very specific. Instead of general and generic, they're very specific to the unit that you're going to be presenting. So this unit was on sound. So then those questions that the teacher used would then be, lensed through that phenomenon, through that unit. It gives some ideas for what to listen for from students, and then give space for the teacher afterwards, after they teach, to reflect on, well, what did the students actually say? And what discourse strategies did I use? So this is a really nice planning and reflection tool for how to go through the steps for eliciting student ideas. And then on the second page, there's a place to reflect on what are the partial understandings, alternative understandings, everyday language that the students are using that I can leverage. And like the alternative understandings, like we saw a couple groups in that class, they drew the musical notes, and they thought if you look closely enough that you can see musical notes in the air. So we want to make sure to that those alternative understandings are addressed. So it's important to know those. And then what experiences might the students have that can be leveraged, as well as the language? What language can be leveraged? They're using everyday language. How can you connect that everyday language to the academic language and transfer that into the students using academic language? Okay, so we're out of time, but we want to take a second here to ask you, what are your big takeaways for today? What are the most important things that you want people to walk away from this PD when you do this PD with your staff? What's the most important thing that you want them to walk away with?
I think, speaking, we're speaking from a lens of equity. We want student voice to be heard by allowing them to really just take over what their idea about what the world looks like and how it functions, versus us telling them how it should be, right? And them reaching a level of identity, right? To feel as if they're scientists working on an understanding of a phenomena, rather than trying to figure that out in a textbook or something.
Thank you, Pedro. Any other last word?
Honestly, Craig, the tool, it really will work great. I know this was a physics example, but my mind is already going around the biology one using tool. So it helps me a lot. Like, instead of me looking for something in order to do this for me. And I hope my department will agree once they see this.
Yes, Joy agrees. Good reflection tool. Jules says allows students to have the space to make meaning.
Yes.
Understand. Good. And then Carmelita, how to elicit students' voice, student participation. Thank you.
Craig.
Yes.
Yes, I think this student voice is really powerful. As a teacher, the moment you will hear a student's voice, participation, their ideas, I think as a teacher, that would be a big point, and you will feel that the student is learning once the students are really sharing their thoughts and ideas instead of just being quiet and submitting the worksheet. You don't really know if is that really coming from their own ideas or they just only search the correct answer, something like that. So student voice, I would say, is really powerful, and to elicit that, I think that is really something that we need to start doing if we did not start yet. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So on that note, I want to say thank you. You were all so engaged today. It was really wonderful to hear your thinking. Such a pleasure to be here with you on a Saturday morning and to hear your thoughts and how we can work together to improve, to take the science instruction that's happening at our schools, take it to that next level. So thank you for being here with us today. Please make sure to reach out to us. In Young has put the sign out into the chat. Also, there's an evaluation form if you could. We value your feedback. And then there's also links to the slide deck. I'm going to send you, we're recording this. I'll send you a link to the recording of this as well. There's, we have a recording from, do we have one for the first session? I think we have the teacher version first session. We don't have the leadership version first session. But we'll have all of those in one place where you can see what we have, as well as all of the PD decks. So once again, thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll see you soon.
Thank you
so much, guys.
Bye, everyone. Happy Saturday.
Yes. And did Young Mai leave? Young Mai? Okay, she left. I'll reach out to her later.
Have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye.